first hour, we're going to talk about ordination. The second hour, we'll be talking about specific issues related to elders. And then for the last hour, we'll start talking about church finances. That'll be the first part of that. We want to welcome Tom Colban here tonight after his amazing presentation of the rap last night. My wife was very edified, so I was not there, but my wife really enjoyed it, so thank you for that. And hello to everybody else here. Okay, so God help us with this. We're talking about ordination tonight. We're not going to really give a biblical doctrine of ordination. I hope you've gotten that in other classes during your Bible college career. But we're going to talk about a few issues, really sort of practical issues related to it. And as always, feel free to ask questions because that gives life and helps me to meet things that you're thinking about. But here we go. A few years ago, Greater Grace, we made a decision, I don't know if this is 4-ish years ago, maybe some of you were aware of it if you were out in the field, on the mission field at that time. But the decision basically went this way, and it's that we're going to treat ordination as really a matter for local assemblies. And for years, really for my entire, maybe this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but for a long time, Greater Grace, most of the ordinations, or a lot of them, were handled here in Baltimore. And you had people from around the world. How do I get ordained? And we'll be taking care of that here. And we will put them through our process. They would come and take the test here. And in fact, that's what I did 20 years ago. I came here at convention time and spent some hours on a couple of days taking a test, and then was ordained on Saturday night of convention. And then, as I said, a few years ago, we really sort of changed that philosophy. And in some ways, you could look at that as sort of a radical change. But to us, it wasn't really that big a deal. I know it may hit people as a big deal, but to us, it was more just sort of a natural progression. And really, we made the change for really two reasons. Number one, just how we view the local assembly. And number two, second reason is just because of the size of the number of churches in Greater Grace. We're up to, I think, over 500 churches now. I don't have the latest count. But those two issues really sort of drove us in a certain direction. And then also, I just think maybe, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I think maybe Pastor Schaller's just experience and his sort of persona, who he's been for his life overseas, and then also Pastor Shabelli also. And so we really said that ordinations are really something for the local assembly, and we get that from the Bible. And like I said, we also get it for practical considerations also. And I know that Pastor Schaller, again, I hope I'm not, I know I'm not misquoting, but I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here. But a few years ago, there was a certain ordination that took place overseas, and I asked him, how did that happen? How did that come about? And his answer was something like this: I've been doing this my whole life, so for many years, and maybe some of you are aware of this from certain churches overseas, you know that he has been performing ordinations. And I think also Pastor Shabelli, too. He's had just a lot of things have happened, especially in the continent of Africa. Sorry, I had to get the right word. In the continent of Africa, this has been going on. And I don't mean that in the bad sense. This has been happening, thank God. And we'd really look at it and say that this is something that local assemblies ought to be doing, right? Local assemblies don't need to be asking us to go soul winning, right? They don't need to be asking us to start Bible colleges. And it's like, what are you talking about? Of course you're going to teach the Bible to your people. They don't need to be asking us to do church planting, or missions planting. And we just heard the report from Burkina Faso, from Pastor Bamuni that we saw in church a few weeks ago. And he's got teams going to Mali, planning to send a team to Senegal, and maybe some other things that are happening. And stuff is just happening there. People are being led by God. They're getting up and they're sending people out. And when we see this happening, we don't say to ourselves, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? Did they ask us? We say, thank God, this is exactly what we want to be producing. People who don't just follow us, but follow in our faith and do the things that we have done. And we would include ordination in that realm of things that a local assembly ought to be doing. And there was also, I had a conversation some years ago, I forget, it wasn't just me and him, but a conversation where Pastor Shabeli was there. And he was in a church some years ago that he was not happy with the way things are going. And one of the things that concerned him was that, well, this church is not sending out missionaries and no one's getting ordained. There is no growth happening here. And that's why I asked you that question in class a few weeks ago, Pastor Ben, about a certain pastor. I don't know who it is, but the situation overseas. Like, is this man trying to hold people to himself, or is he sending them out? And the answer is no, they're free to go, which is like, thank God, people need to be free to go. This is who we are. This is what we do. And if we are preaching the Word of God, we will see young men being raised up in our midst. Young men will be gifted, middle-aged, old men also. I'm young in the sense that, growing in the church. And that God will put it in people's hearts to go on the mission field. It's like we don't necessarily have to be telling people or asking people to go. God will put it on their hearts because that is what He does. And God's, I know it can be considered maybe a trite saying, but, the Word of God does the work of God. Well, we very much believe that. Amazing story if you've read the book Bruchko. He preaches the Bible, and then these guys get the Bible, and they come to him, Bruchko, why are we not doing this? We think we should be doing this. And he'll sit there, absolutely you should be doing that. Go ahead and do it. Who am I here? And that's kind of how, our churches grow. Now, of course, there's a balance to that, but I'm just making a different point, and you understand that. So we put that out there, and there's, and the local assemblies, some of them were doing it anyway, like certain parts of the world, this was happening anyway. People weren't so much waiting to be told. But then there might be other people that are closer to us just because of geography or because of, the history of that local assembly, and they're really, looking to us as far as these ordinations go. And I actually, like I say, 20 years ago when I was ordained, I was really sort of in that situation. I was not in Baltimore. I was in an affiliate church up in Massachusetts, and the pastor came to me and said, have you thought about getting ordained? I said, yeah, I've maybe thought about it a little bit, and then some months go by, and he came back to me and says, well, have you thought about being ordained? What are you going to do? Is it going to be a yes or a no? And I said, well, okay, if you're going to push me, it's going to be a yes. And then we proceeded. But I proceeded really by applying down in Baltimore for ordination. And the pastor up there wrote a recommendation, but I got the study materials from Baltimore, studied for some months, and then came down, as I said, at convention 1991, I'm pretty sure was the year, took a 2-day, total of, 6-hour or 12-hour written examination, and then went in and had an oral examination and passed that, and then that Saturday evening was ordained at the big Saturday night convention. And it was kind of interesting because, just a little aside, not so much to do with this class, but one of the comments they made to me and the people that were with me in the oral exam was, they said it was refreshing to have someone here who was actually well prepared to take this test, And I heard that, I say, well, that's interesting, because I don't think of myself as this great I'm not a Bible scholar, maybe a Bible student. I read the Bible, but I don't think of myself as this great, person in terms of that type of knowledge. So I just wonder who else was taking these exams and what sort of shape they were in. So it's just a little bit of encouragement to you gentlemen who would like to be ordained, to encourage you, not to slow you down at all, but to say, pay the price. We want us to be well-prepared men. If we have to choose between a heart and a head, we're going to choose the heart every day of the week. But the head is important. It's important that you know the faith, that you can expound it accurately and consistently, really with the Word of God. And of course, with what we're taught here, that you're passing on what we've taught you. And, we want you to develop sort of a sharpness and precision in your knowledge of the Bible, because you will get questions. And, left and right, you will get things. You'll get people in your church who are untaught, or in some cases worse, in some cases have been taught by other churches. Some of it was good and some of it was wrong. So people come in with concepts, and it's very helpful to be able to really accurately know the faith and what we believe. So that's a little bit of an aside. So we would say that the local assembly really is in the driver's seat as far as ordinations go. And we've had a number of situations where in the last, 12 months, 24 months since we've changed our policy, where people are still sort of in the old system. They come to us and they say, I want to be ordained. And we say, go back and talk to the pastor in your local church. He's the guy who was behind this. Now, I say that, but there's a little bit of a balance to that, and I want to spend some time on that, so I just give a full picture of what's happening here. The thing about Greater Grace churches is that like the established church that has been around for 20 years or more, that there's been multiple generations of pastors, that is sort of the exception with Greater Grace. I know those churches exist, but I don't think that there's a lot of them. I'm not so sure in some parts of the world what it's like, but I just think that your average church in Greater Grace, you take Pastor Kenda in Hungary. It was really, as best I understand it, Pastor Schaller, Pastor Lange, then they departed, Pastor Boyce came, and then Pastor Kenda came in. Do I have that right? Okay, good, thank you for that. And the point there is that Pastor Kenda, just because of his history, he's very closely related to Pastor Schaller. He would really look to Pastor Schaller as the guy. Pastor Boyce was there, I don't know how many years. Okay, so a very short amount of time. And not anything about that specific gentleman, but 18 months, 24 months, that is nothing in the life cycle of a pastor. That's barely even enough time for your people to know who you are. It just takes those transitions. We're not going to, maybe we'll talk about those tonight, but those transitions take a lot of time and they are not easy. So I'm saying the amount of time he was there, beautiful labor, but short. And so Pastor Ken is really looking to Pastor Schaller. So I'm just saying that's generally what we have for our churches across Greater Grace, is that there's really a very short link or chain from the pastor who was there back to the guy who may have founded the church, who was Pastor Schaller or Pastor Scherbelli, someone like that. Now, you may have some exceptions. Maybe you could look at the church in London. Now, I may be speaking out of some ignorance, but you get Pastor Morley. Before that, that church has been there for a long, long time, and it goes all the way back to the old days. And I don't want to name names because I might name the wrong guy and offend somebody. But that church has been there a long time. It really has an identity. There's people who've been in that church. So I'm just trying to show you that there can be churches that are at very, very different places in sort of like their life cycle or their growth. Pastor Morrison has been there for decades in Marlborough. He's got men in his church. He's got Pastor Arnold Van Doren. He's got Pastor Mike Daigle, maybe another one, but he has ordained pastors, men around him. That church was really planted by Pastor Stevens, who has passed on to his reward. He is in heaven right now. So the founder of that church is no longer with us, and Pastor Morrison was in that church when Pastor Stevens was here, and then Pastor Schaller came in Baltimore, and one might say that Pastor Morrison's and Pastor Schaller's relationship is more brotherly than fatherly. I can't look into men's hearts and judge these matters, and I may be speaking a little bit wrongly here, but I don't think so, although I know that Pastor Morrison and Pastor Schaller had a relation, decades ago back in Scandinavia also, which I'm not so much a part about that. But I would say, just giving these examples I'm talking about, Okay, let's give another example. Okay, now we'll go to example number 3 here. We've got Brother Ben Tangy over in Hamden. Okay, he's got a small church team, 15 people. I don't know what he has. Amazing, faithful people, amazing work. Great preacher. We heard him the other night. The guy's awesome. It's like I just want to weep when he gets up there because he's so pure. And he's been doing the work there, but it's like sent by Homebase, by Pastor Schaller. We had a huge hand in starting that church. We've materially assisted them. Not Pastor Ben. Brother Ben is not ordained. Does he have elders with him? I know that Nate McFarland is helping him. I know that, who else? David Peterson. I don't know if those guys are still there, but small team, no ordained guys that I'm aware of. So you've got this spectrum of churches that are at different places in where they are. Now, for that, now I'm speaking practically, and it's important to understand that we sort of set this course up from day one, that there's sort of a organic or a life aspect to a church, and then there's sort of a corporate or organizational aspect to a church. And this course has really focused on the corporate and organizational aspects. Everybody understands that, okay? So this is not by any means the fullness of your Bible college education. It's one course out of 4 years of a full load for you folks, but we're just covering some important points. But when I'm talking about ordination, we really have moved back over onto what I would say like the life, sort of the spiritual side of a church as opposed to the organizational side of it. Ordination has organizational aspects that I think we'll get to, but when I'm talking right now, I'm really talking about the practicalities of, when am I as a pastor going to take a guy in my church, put him up on stage, get some guys around him, and lay hands on him and hand him an ordination certificate. When am I going to do that? Okay? And I would say, I think my opinion, and I think the opinion, I'm not going to say it, but I would say it's my opinion that every local assembly has a right to do that. Okay? But because we're not talking organizationally, we're talking more on the life spiritual side of it, do rights really matter? I mean, are we really standing on our rights? I can do this, I have a right to do it. That is not even a question. The question is, God, how are you leading me, and what is the wisdom of this situation? Okay? And I would say that local assemblies have a responsibility to be teaching, preaching, and in that process they'll be raising up men, and there will come a time when the guy has the gift and the calling and the evidence and the desire and the training, and we want to recognize this man who he is by declaring him to be ordaining, handing him a certificate. How am I going to do that? Okay? So I gave you the example of Marlboro. Let's take that name out of it, but let's take that situation. An established pastor, a lot of experience under his belt. He's got a board of elders with ordained men on his board of elders. If a church in that situation were to pull a guy out of their congregation and lay hands on him and hand him a certificate, I think we would say, praise God. That's wonderful. That's awesome. We're glad you're doing it. We have full confidence in what you're doing. That's great. Now, you might have another situation. Let's take the other extreme, the church in Hamden. Okay? You've got a man pastoring that church who is not ordained. He's working very closely with his spiritual father, with us here. And if I were in that, let me put it, if I were in that situation, I would not want to be in the business of ordaining people. Let me put it that way. Because if I did it, I personally would just feel a little funny about it, or maybe very funny. Number one, I'm not even ordained. I got no one else here standing up with me on stage who is ordained. In this situation, I see the gift, and I want this to happen and be encouraging this man. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle the situation? And we would recommend in that situation that you would get help, and that you would want to get help, and that you would get help, and that help would be available to you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes.
Like in our church, Pastor Schaller is the
leader of our organization and our church. So like in Hungary, someone wants to get ordained and Pastor Kenda says, yes, you can get ordained because I see you have the gifts.
Right.
Like, still, I know that Pastor Schaller is not like our pastor in that sense.
Right.
But like, does he have like a veto right? Or like if he sees something, or like, do you understand what I mean? Like
yeah.
a friend
And that's an excellent question. And that's a little more difficult one, which is why I went from the well-established church to the unestablished church. I left that one out because that's a little more a difficult situation. But I would put it this way. There's like an organizational answer to it, okay? And that's why this is like interesting, but that's why we have this course. And the organizational answer is churches are, self-governing, self-propagating, self-supporting. And it really, in that situation, I think it would really just depend, that's how I would look on it, on really the confidence level of the, the confidence level of the pastor in that situation. I don't mean a fleshly confidence level. That's why I don't want people to have it walking out of here, I have a right to ordain people. That means nothing. But it's like, has God, given that to you? And if he has, then, who are we to stand in the way of it? I imagine in the specific situation that you're talking about, most likely there are phone calls going from Hungary to home base. But there might be some situations where maybe, the example you've given, Pastor Schaller doesn't know the guy. I'm saying maybe it's like a third generation. You got Pastor Kenda, and then you got maybe Pastor Shaba in some other church, and there's some guy there that's been going to Bible college there, and we just don't know him. And Pastor Schaller might not even have the, the knowledge of the specific man, and he might say something like, geez, well, he might ask a few questions. Has the guy graduated from Bible college? Is he sound? How's his marriage? He might just cover some of those bases, and then he might say, that's great if you want to do that, So it's like that's why you've got these different situations. I want you to be aware of them. You are going to be in these situations, but that's also, why we said that a couple classes ago, we laid the foundation of voluntary accountability, and then we went to the principle of the spiritual father, and then the third link in that chain is ordination, because without spiritual father, without voluntary accountability to walk into organization, into ordination on an organizational level, we think that if you do that, you're going to lose something, and you're going to just lose the benefit of all of these wonderful people that God has called you to fellowship with throughout Greater Grace World Outreach. Is that making sense? So it's like, again, when Pastor Schaller in the old days was ordaining people in Finland, I don't know how that worked. I think maybe there's some phone calls to Pastor Stevens. The way he has explained it is Pastor Stevens gave him the green light. Do all that's in your heart. That's not a quote, but I think it just depends on who you're dealing with. Tay, I've got people in my office. What I'm saying? Some people I tell them to use their judgment. Just in situations. Other people I'd say, geez, can you run that decision by me? And there's just a comfort level that you get, and that comfort level changes over time. You say, use your judgment, and the judgment is proven to be wrong. Well, you better run that by me from now on. The judgment is proven to be sound. It's like, have at it. I'm not here to hold your hand or to keep you a child. I'm here to help you grow up, and you've proven maturity. This is great. It's a help to me and help to the kingdom of God as we go forward. So, excellent question. So, some local assemblies may want or need help depending on what's going on there. But also, it really, it brings us back, I think we may bring this up again, I think when we talk about elders, but I'm going to bring it now because it's relevant. I guess we got to digress a little bit and talk about this. At Greater Grace World Outreach Baltimore, we have a board of elders, right? 7 guys, they're 7 pastors. I don't mean to be familiar using the term guys. They're on this board of elders. They are the ultimate spiritual governing body. And, yes, sir. Who are the 7 elders? Pastor Schaller, Pastor Shabeli, Pastor Love, Pastor Cannon, Pastor Shibley, Pastor Hadley, and Dr. Wright. Those are the 7 guys. Okay? And Pastor Bruce Wright, he's actually pastoring a church up in Havertide. He's in another church, but he's on our board here. He does come to services here. I saw him, I think, Sunday evening, but I think he's probably here one service a week, maybe two. I don't keep tabs, but I'm just saying this is very important. I'm glad you asked, but I'm just illustrating that it's possible, and we're doing it here, to have a pastor on the board of elders who has interest elsewhere and is spending time elsewhere. So that's the board of elders. But the point I want to make is that is like an organizational, governing, corporate board of elders, absolutely having a spiritual function. But I would say, as I read the Bible, spiritually, elders are not limited to gentlemen sitting on the board of elders. Okay? And as Pat, those, you get some of you are who's going to graduate this spring if you pass this course? Okay, so I'm sorry about that. A lot of us are going to graduate. All of us should know that in the New Testament, there's 3 words that are given for pastor. There's pastor, bishop, and elder. But we teach and believe that those names all refer to the same individual, but emphasize different aspects of the same individual. That's what Pastor Stevens taught. I believe that all pastors are elders. You know what I'm saying? And so the word shepherd, poimen, that emphasizes the feeding the flock aspect of the job. Bishop, episkopos, represents the ruling or overseeing aspect. And then the third one, presbyteros, elder, emphasizes, the wisdom and character of the individual. But those all come together in the same person. So you would have elders in the church, not necessarily limited to people that are sitting on a board of elders. And then this is very important. You might also have people sitting on the board of elders or having the office of being, on the governing board of elders who are not actually elders, okay? They're not ordained individuals, okay? You've got a small church somewhere in some country. You've got a guy there. Maybe he's ordained, maybe he isn't. I don't know. It can go different ways. And he's got a church of 15 people or 35 people. And to meet legal requirements, because he has a corporation there, he's registered with that country as an entity, whatever the laws are there, he needs to have a governing board. And he sets it up as best he can according to the outline that we give, with a board of elders, maybe a board of trustees, maybe not, but he needs to populate that board. And sometimes what happens is that board will be populated with just the best guys he has from that church. But they may be, young men. I know in our, who has to be age 35 and up? Our elders? I know one of you brought it up when you critiqued our bylaws. No one wants to step up to the plate. Okay, was it you? No. I think it was trustees. Trustees have to be 35 and up or something? Yeah, but one of you asked me, where is this number 35 coming from? And I would say that number's arbitrary. We made that up. There's nothing magic about that number. But you might have a young guy, just because that's the best guy you have. You got a guy with you, maybe he's been to Bible college, not a pastor, but he is a sound man. He's serving on your team, and you put him on your board of elders because he's the best guy you have. Especially in that situation, I would say I personally would not want that board of elders as constituted ordaining people. It would not be scriptural to me to have someone who is not a pastor laying hands on someone else to ordain him. We're in First Timothy, where you train faithful men who in turn will train other people also, right? So like this very important chain that happens, as I understand it, where I follow somebody else's faith and I pass on to the next person the faith that I have received and been taught. Scriptural faith, but lived out before me in an awesome way with the people that we have in this church. So in my mind, scripturally, it would be impossible for that group of guys to ordain someone when they're not ordained themselves. I would not, I'm not saying I would like make a fuss over it, but that would be I would say to those guys, do you really want to be doing this? I mean, can you just read the Bible and tell us if you really want to be doing what you're doing? We would discourage that. I wouldn't say we would outlaw it or forbid it because, again, we don't govern other churches, okay? But, the only say we have in other churches is because there's voluntary accountability and because it's not just the pastor, but the people in that church can care about us also, So in the example you gave, Enrico, if you had a pastor just doing crazy things, people in the congregation would start looking at it, and then they would start calling home base and saying, "Did you know what's going on here? Someone better get over here and help us," And these things unfortunately happen, where people do come to help, and if the pastor refuses that help, then he's probably going to lose congregation members, But if he receives the help, he'll hold it all together. I'm just telling you how it goes, So. Yes.
Have we ever excommunicated?
Excommunication is a word we don't normally use. It's really a lot. We're not going to fellowship with a certain individual. Okay. Certainly, as the Catholic Church uses it, you cannot take communion. There definitely in the last 24 months was a pastor whose ordination was removed. I was aware of that. We don't publicize that. And then another type of excommunication would be booting, telling a church member you can no longer come to church. And I've never seen that happen from the pulpit. I have seen people made so uncomfortable that they stopped coming. Like if I had, some person I knew in the church was in some sort of gross, overt sin. As a body member, I'm going to go and talk to that person and say, "What are you doing?" And if he has enough of those conversations, he's not going to come anymore. So does that answer your question? Okay, very interesting. I haven't thought about that in a while. And then also, I don't know if it's happened, but we could say to a church, we don't really want you considering yourself to be a Greater Grace Church anymore. But normally that goes the other way. People tell us that instead of us telling them that because we generally try to keep the door open, but it can become uncomfortable, and people make make these decisions. So, now, there are some cases where ordinations are better handled at home base, and the first one might be you have a pastor out there, his church is just too small to be conducting ordinations. Option one is to have us come and help him. Option two might be to put that individual through someone else's process. But then situation number two, which happens frequently, is there might be a guy that we've really sent him out. We send him on the mission field. We send him off to, Peru or to Zambia or something. He's there on the field for a few years, and he says, "You know what, I want to be ordained." And because of his relationship with us, where he has a longer history with us, and again, maybe it's a smaller church out there, because of that close relationship with us, we say, "Look, it makes more sense that we would ordain him because we really sent him. We don't know how long he's going to be there. He may come back. He may want to go somewhere else. We know him better than you do. His relationship with us, he went through our Bible college. We were really his pastor for 10 years. We're going to ordain him here." It goes that way sometimes, and there's a few of those situations going on right now also. And all these things are very, very real, and because I'm sort of like our board of elders is our ordination board here, but I'm sort of like the secretary for that board as it relates to ordination. So these things come to me, and I have dealt with all these situations. So-and-so on a certain missions team wants to get ordained. Hey, you know what? I think we're gonna do that here. That pastor's not even ordained, although he's going to be. There's no elders there, And then also, I left one thing out. You might have, like, in terms of a pastor or a local church out there that needs help, we don't have to be the ones giving the help. If there's guys who are nearby who can give help, it would go that way. You know what I'm saying? You might have churches in Africa, all sorts of activity. There's plenty of you know, heft, or whatever you want to call it, gravity in Ghana that can handle those situations. I know that they're on the phone with Pastor Shibeli, but you know, we wouldn't get involved in those situations. Or maybe I'm trying to think of another country where there's just a lot of activity. India. You know what I'm saying? We got guys over there who know what they're doing, experienced men. They really don't need our help. If we happen to be in the country, maybe we'll fly one of our guys over there to attend the conference just to put our stamp of approval on it because it's important to them, but it's not like we need to be highly involved in that process. Okay? So did you have your hand up? Yeah. And then let's just run the microphone over to him.
You just said that the Board of Elders does do the ordination here. I understand that's by ordained pastors. I just wanted to get confirmation. Is there like one sole like authority on who ordains? Like, for example, in the Greater Grace Church, is Pastor Schauer like the one who actually charges them with the ordination?
Well, I can tell you that in this church here, that the final sign-off, actually, that's all the way through, but the final sign-off on ordinations that we perform is made by a vote of our Board of Elders. It's not just Pastor Schaller pulling the trigger. Now, of course, as the senior pastor, does his, you know, recommendation carry a lot of weight? Yes, it does, and we'll talk about that. But no, that's by vote. And we would really, you know, recommend that to churches, that there would be a collegial or cooperative process. You know, if I was the pastor of a church and I wanted to ordain a guy and no one else was with me on it, that would really slow me down. I'm wanting to do that. It's like, I got bigger issues than getting this guy ordained if the other guys around me are, you know, are not with me on it. We'd want to solve that problem and go forward in unity. But you know, it's conceivable we might have a 5-2 vote. You know, I just don't know if we would go forward in that situation. I think we might, but we might not. You know, we might. I mean, that happens with our boards here sometimes. We have a vote. Oh my gosh, we didn't realize some guys were against it. Let's go back and rethink the decision. You know, sometimes we get surprised like that. Okay, anybody else? We're still talking about ordination. It's not now or never. Yes, sir.
In the light of what happened with our ministry in the past.
You got a green light there?
Yeah. So, like those ordained men who detached from Greater Grace, like in that case, did their ordination have any weight?
Okay. I would say with ordinations that they carry as much weight as, it's kind of like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You ever heard that phrase? You know, if people give it weight, it has weight. If no one cares about it, you know, I've got a college diploma on the wall of my office. Like, who cares? I mean, well, a lot of people do. It's like I went to a known university and people, oh my gosh, you know, that's like important. Whereas if I had a mail order diploma, but you know what I'm saying? So it's like these things can have a different range of value. Greater Grace ordinations, who recognizes them? Whoever wants to. You know, we recognize our own ordinations. We have tended to recognize ordinations made by other Greater Grace churches. You know, when, you know, we have a lot of ordinations going on in Africa, and sometimes, hey, wait a minute, are these Greater Grace ordinations or aren't they? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I recognize them. I think we all, no one's saying anything about that, but that ordination was given by the body that gave it, that local assembly. You know, and the question you're asking is excellent, and that's part of the reason, I didn't get into this, but I should have, that's part of the reason why we really wanted to distribute the ordinations out to churches, is because we cannot rightly take responsibility for ordinations that are going on the other side of the earth that we're not a part of, and that we don't know the people's lives and we're not monitoring their progress. We didn't want that responsibility. We have enough problem with the, you know, I don't know, 400 or 500 ordinations that we've done here over the years. So the question is, there are a number of people that have, their churches have left Greater Grace, and what is the status of those ordinations? And I think it really depends on the individual. A number of those men have mailed their ordinations back to us. They've renounced their ordinations. Okay, so I mean, thank you in the sense that thank you for informing us. Not we're glad about it or mad about it or anything like that, but just okay, we're glad to have this information so we can keep our records right here. There's other individuals who have continued to operate with those ordinations. There's one man up in New England. He left Baltimore, in my mind, very honorably in 2005. His life is clean. His doctrine is pure. He's continued to do the work. He recently asked us for he was applying to pastor in some other assembly, not a Greater Grace church, but some other denominational church. He was applying to pastor in that church. And he asked us for some sort of letter just to say that his ordination was still in force. And I forget how we worded it, because we're not observing his life every day. It's a little bit at a distance. We couldn't, give this total seal of approval because we weren't so close to it. But we could say, no, his ordination is still active. I think that's the term we use. We have no desire to pull ordinations from people because, we believe God ordained them. It was for a purpose. And they're serving in another venue right now. Thank God that they're still doing something. That's how we think about it. But what we are doing, or we haven't done it yet, and this is going around the world now, we intend to do some sort of a recertification that will take place every so many years. We'll get in touch with these men. Are you still active? Do you still consider yourself to be an ordained Greater Grace pastor? Did you dump your wife and marry your secretary? Are you, stuff like, ask some questions like that. Are you drinking? We'll ask them, what's going on? Do you still represent us well? And if the answer to all those questions are yes, 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 do you still agree with our statement of faith? Then we'll send them out, a renewed ordination. We'll keep them on our active list. The guys that we lose track of, we're just not in touch with them. We'll put them on some sort of list that is not active. And again, this is just if we ever get a call from, the state police of the state of, let me think of a state now, of New Mexico, and they say, Pastor so-and-so is performing, wedding ceremonies in our state. Is he one of your ordained pastors? Well, here's the situation officer. He was ordained in 1989, and we haven't heard from him in 20 years. We have sent him, information to try and get in touch with him. He hasn't responded. He's in our inactive list. We cannot vouch or cannot tell you anything about this man right now because we have no active contact with him. So that's the situation that in the scenario we foresee. When people are waving around a piece of paper with our name on it, then there is some accountability that happens there. Does that answer your question? So that is we've never done that before, but that is on the books, and we will be implementing that process as soon as we get to it because this stuff takes time. Okay? Yes?
Like, if they ordain someone in Hungary, except Pastor Kende, officially nobody is ordained, by the state.
By us, you mean? By
the state, they are not
of Hungary, you mean?
Yes, because now the situation is that our church is not a church anymore. So Pastor Kende is not a pastor officially in Hungary. So my question is that if an international person gets ordained here by GGWO, it means that in America they are officially pastors and they can...
Yeah, which, given that, Aniko, the officially pastors doesn't mean a whole lot of anything to the government. All it means, the only official thing you can do is perform a wedding ceremony and sign a wedding certificate. Outside of that, there's just no recognition. I mean, and there's one other thing, obscure thing related to taxes, but that's about it.
Yeah, but in Hungary they cannot do that.
Okay, yeah, so you have to have the civil wedding and then the church wedding, so I understand how that works. Okay, now, let's keep going here. I'm sorry, any other, yes, sir?
You also get efficient parking at hospitals.
which is not the state. That's a private institution. Okay. Very good. Okay. Now, to keep going here, in terms of how we qualify men for ordination, we look at their experience, what are they doing? We look at their education, and we look at their character. Okay, we care what their life is like. We observe, watch, ask them questions. We look at what they're doing. Are they doing the work of a pastor? And then we also do have an educational requirement, which is that we want you to be a graduate of Maryland Bible College and Seminary, although we can certainly substitute that. And of course, our ordination board, our board of elders, has the right to ordain anybody they want to. But generally, these are the things we're looking for. And we have a number of guys in the queue who are on hold. Listen, get your Bible college diploma, and then we'll talk about it. I can think of maybe 2 or 3 guys in that situation right now. And then this experience thing, this is kind of evolving also. Now, I have a full ordination. Okay, we in Baltimore, we do 3 things: license to preach, associate pastor, and pastor, full ordination, whatever you want to call that. License to preach is really to recognize a man, just to let him know and let people know that we approve that he is out expounding, proclaiming the Word of God. Maybe he's teaching in a Sunday school class, maybe he's a team leader and on some outreach, and he's preaching to his team. Maybe he has a Bible study somewhere. Maybe he's functioning in the ministry, has a gift of communication, or at least has solid communicational content, and we want to recognize and endorse what he is doing. That's license to preach. Sometimes it's a stepping stone to ordination, sometimes it may not be, depends on the specific situation. Okay? Now, the second thing we have is the associate pastor. Okay? And that is a pastor operating in a local assembly under the leadership of an overseeing pastor. Okay? In Baltimore, we have a number of pastors like myself who have full ordination, but we're really operating under under Pastor Shallow. I'm really functioning as an associate pastor, or maybe even as a deacon, just serving in the church, depending on how we think about it. Okay, and then we have the full ordination. Now, I have never pastored a church. I've never been an overseeing pastor. I've pastored. I was a youth pastor. I've pastored teams. I tend to approach the leadership I exercise from a pastoral point of view, but I've never been an overseeing pastor in a church. It's possible that if I were to show up today and say I'd like to be ordained, I would be steered towards being an associate pastor. I'm just telling you that's how it goes. So we don't want to look at these things as like second-class ordinations or one's better than. We don't want to be thinking that way. We just want to be thinking about, what is this guy's gift? What is his role? I know Pastor Ben, at least the way Pastor Shabeli talks about Africa, before you give a guy an ordination, you really want him out there really doing the work. Is that accurate? So okay, you want to be a pastor? Well, go pastor. Where's the, why don't you go start a Bible study here, and we'll see what happens there. If people respond to your leadership and you're pastoring them, and they start looking to you, and you're doing the work and feeding the flock, and it's growing, and there's life there, I guess you are a pastor. We will recognize you. So that's kind of like, I know in Africa the emphasis is more on having the experience and then getting the credentials. Where I think here in America sometimes it's more the credentials come first and then the experience comes. But that's in a little bit of flux right now. And then when I would just say on a very practical level, we also have the phenomenon of guys who do the work and the credential really lags behind. Like, we get guys going out and they're starting Bible studies and they're growing and things are happening. And some of these, I hope I say this the right way, some of these gentlemen appear to be in no hurry to be ordained. And, we would, you're out pastoring people, don't you want to do this? Yeah, I'll get to that. I just can't take any courses this semester. It kind of goes that way. So you do end up with a few, what I would call just kind of like funny situations. But again, the kingdom of God is growing, is advancing. Men's gifts are being used, people are being blessed, and it's, we're not like ordination police out there, you know, and in the same way that, you know, we encourage you not to stand on your rights, but let's be led in the will of God. That's our approach to it. We're not looking to stand on our rights, and we let situations go for a long, long time before we step in and really, you know, take drastic actions. It's very rare that we do that. You know, we sit down, we talk to people, we give them room, give them space, because we're just not in the business of pulling ordinations except in extreme situations. So we have these requirements, and then we also have a process here in Baltimore. We're not saying you have to use this process, but it is the one we use. And it basically, you know, we actually do a pre-application, and we just ask some sort of potentially disqualifying questions up front, like, you know, are you married? Have you ever been married before? Well, what happened with that? You know, what was the circumstance of your previous marriage? How did we end up in this situation? We ask. I can show you this form. It's no secret. We ask, you know, what do you believe about the gift of speaking in tongues in public? You know, what's your stand on that? And sometimes I read one recently, and the guy was so conservative. It was like, whoa! I mean, we're not. He like went way overboard. It's like it was like speaking, you know, anyway, I don't want to go through that too much, but it was like it's like could never happen. You know what I'm saying? It's like, gee, I don't believe it could never happen. I think it could in some situations. So we ask, you know, do you drink? Do you have any other habits that we should know about that might affect your testimony? You know, do you gamble? Do you you know, on the internet, what websites? We ask him those type of questions. We don't want to put him to work and us to a bunch of work and get him way down the road, and then find out in an oral exam, you know, 2 weeks before, you know, the ordination, when his family has tickets to come see him ordained, to say, oh, whoa, we can't do this. So we try to catch some of the stuff up front. So there's a pre-app, then there's an application, and that includes, he talks about his experience. He gets recommendations from his sponsoring pastor, which in Baltimore is Pastor Schaller, and maybe some other recommendations. We consider the application. And then at each step of the way, there is a vote. The Board of Elders sign off on it. So we don't get way down the road and then have someone say, what about? We don't want anybody in that situation. So all 7 of our elders sign off each step of the way. If we like their application, then they get the written exam. As some of you know, the way we're doing our written exam right now is that we give people a study guide, and it's really a take-home test. They've got 2 months to answer like 600 questions, and they have to pace themselves. It's you know, a lot of work, but we're not trying to get them to study for a PhD. We just want to make sure that they know, you know, a broad range of you know, all the different major doctrines, along with greater grace distinctive doctrines. Then we turn that back in, and then that's reviewed. You know, 1 or 2 of our elders will review it. Then there'll be another vote, and then it goes to the oral exam. Okay, and I haven't been to an oral exam except mine, you know, 20 years ago, and they can take all sorts of forms. You know, you could be grilled on certain. I know I was at that when I was, you know, examined a long time ago. That was when the literal blood of Christ was like a hot issue, because you had guys on the West Coast talking about spiritual blood, and it was like a very bothersome to us. And the guy next to me, some of you know who this man is, but I'm not going to name his name. He quoted some obscure verse in some Old Testament verse about. It's like, what on earth is going on there? And then they asked me the question. I said, well, as far as I go, you know, the literal blood, that's really just a question of hermeneutics. I mean, if the Bible clearly talks about blood being necessary, why would you think there's anything, you know, where's the evidence in the Bible that it's not literal blood? There would have to be like overwhelming evidence in that situation. I don't see that at all, you know, so that's how I approach the question. And I got a gold star. Yes. Microphone over to Brother Tom Colban, well-known rap guest. Is that on? For the oral examination.
Is that like, are the questions more like situational questions? Like, what would you do in this? Or is it just like,
yeah, I mean,
name this verse or something?
I think it could go. I haven't been to. That's why I say I've never done one. I haven't been to one. I know that one guy walked in. This is ages ago. He walked into an oral exam. The question was, when was the last time you went soul winning? The guy said last Friday night. Okay, you pass. I mean, it could go that way. I think it depends on how well you know the individual. If it was someone that I had worked closely with, I might not have a whole lot to say to him. If someone I didn't know so well or had certain concerns, I might ask some questions, and just, but I think that situational thing, some woman comes to talk to you, she wants to do marriage counseling, what would you do? My answer would be, say, where's your husband? I can talk to both of you. I got to hear both sides of this story, ma'am. That's what I would do. But situational. I think maybe some of the material that we've covered in this class, a lot of situational stuff here, doctrinal, and then lifestyle. And then maybe calling also. See, you want a full ordination. I mean, why do you think that? Or you want an associate pastor, ordination. Why wouldn't you get a full one? We see you out doing this Bible study. You get 20 people coming faithful. You're their pastor. What's the problem? Yeah, never mind. Okay, so that's our process here. At the end of that process, if all systems are go, we have them up on the stage at convention. We also potentially would have them up at the Fitly Framed convention in December, January. I don't know if we've done it yet, but that's another targeted time. And then also, and you saw it last June at convention, we had at least, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I think it was last year, we had at least one guy up there, maybe several. We weren't ordaining them, but they had been ordained in their local church overseas, but we brought them up stage in front of the local assembly just to recognize them. This is our brother. He's been ordained. We're very happy about it. And it's like, we don't use these words, but we absolutely are recognizing your ordination because, you're in affiliated one of our brother churches, and we're very glad that you were out there preaching the gospel and doing the work. And it's very edifying for that person to be in front of 1,000 people, but it's very edifying for his local assembly to be ordained there. I didn't finish my story. So I was ordained, I was in an affiliate ministry, ordained here. I got the charge. Pastor Stevens like, oh my God, do they know who I am? I can't believe they're doing this. But okay, so they ordained me, hand me an ordination certificate. But for me personally, and for my local assembly up in Massachusetts, when I got back, a couple services later, we had like a little reception for Pastor Taggart just to greet me, welcome me aboard. And I'm telling you that time that we had there was almost more meaningful for me than the ordination was here, and it was definitely very meaningful for them because those people were the people that had kind of given birth to me. You know what I'm saying? I was just in that church, 1987, I was 29 years old. I was and just who I was developed, and those people loved me, and they kind of watched me become, a useful person, from being very unuseful to being a useful person in the church. And I had a ministry up there, not a great preaching ministry, but I would preach from time to time. I had led certain outreaches. I was, what was I doing? Youth pastoring maybe at that time, or maybe I was just pastoring the kind of a bus ministry, that bus ministry team, leading that team. And so that edification for the local assembly, the edification for the individual, really in the midst of his family, that is a great practical argument why having ordinations happen out in local assemblies instead of at so-called home base is very important, very valuable. Is everybody getting that? Those are the people that are receiving your ministry. Of course, we receive it, but those are the people you're pastoring. And it's like for them to be in an audience and you up front in front of them, it's like you got the whole. It's like it's like a wedding ceremony. You got the pastor there, but really you got the parents, the family, all these witnesses around you that are invested in your life. And so that's another very practical argument for doing it the way that we're recommending that it be done. Okay? So does that make yes, sir?
How many associate pastors do we have here? And do you know the numbers for full as well?
I don't have. I could get them. I don't have those statistics. I know we've ordained like 500 over the last whatever years. 25 years of this ministry. How many of them were associate? How many are full? I just don't have that.
What about like active now associates in Baltimore, associate pastors? 30?
No, the number we throw out is that there's 70 pastors in Baltimore. Okay? I've never, enumerated those people, but it's quite possible. We got a lot of guys, but I don't know where that is right now. Unless you folks have something else, I think we've covered that subject. Thank you for your lively interaction. And we're going to come back here at 7:26, and then we'll start talking about elders.